Very good morning to you. Theo Usherwood is here. Theo, very happy Monday morning to you.
Yes, it's dark and it's raining.
It's dark, it's raining, it's getting colder, you know, the winter is coming. People are not going to be putting their heating on. I mean, I was up in Manchester at the weekend, and I can tell you, and I know this is going to sound for anybody listening up there, and I've met quite a few people who do love the show, it is a lot colder up there, and you know, you do need to put the heating on if you're in the north of England.
Yes, extra jumpers, extra duvets.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is colder, make no mistake about it.
It is. But it's pretty cold. A lot of people will think we should start with the Tories. I don't think we should, because I think the big story is still Labour.
Yes.
Let's have a look at a couple of clips, because Pat McFadden, who is for me the kind of mastermind to a large extent behind a lot of what Labour does, he came in as a Blairite, didn't he? And he was in part of the big Blair, you know, the big Blair government with Blair and Brown. He was doing the rounds yesterday, attempting to defend all the freebies that have been handed out to him. Let's have a look at what he said to Sky News, I think.
There have been campaign contributions around presentation. There's nothing new or unusual about those. I welcome the support of people like Lord Alli.
There's nothing new or unusual about this. Well, there is actually, because there's something new that happened over the weekend. We discovered there's yet another house. And Labour are sort of defending the same. Big deal, Labour donor has a house, members of the Labour Party go and use the house to have meetings. But it's a bit more than that, isn't it?
Of course it's a bit more than that, and it's, you know, it's not right to compare donations to political parties in the same way that you compare it to say, an animal charity, as well, Wes Streeting tried to do. Because, you know, there is an expectation if you donate to a political party that you will get something in return. And Lord Alli, now we learn, has lent the Labour hierarchy, Sir Keir Starmer's top team, his £4 million Soho townhouse. It's a Georgian property in central London, very close, of course, to his £18 million flat, where the likes of Mr McFadden, who you heard from there, and the Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, held meetings, strategy meetings. Makes me see why they couldn't just have held those meetings in Westminster. There are lots of offices and
or in the aforementioned penthouse, which they said was where they had meetings.
Yes.
And now apparently they didn't just have meetings there. There were a lot of meetings.
There were a lot of. I mean,
do you think they knocked on the door and, you know, Keir Starmer's son answered and went, "No, sorry, I'm having some quiet time. You can't come in here for a meeting. Why don't you go down the other gaff, which is a lovely, great big townhouse in the middle of Soho, and help yourself?" Yeah,
and of course, it's, you know, it's just a stone's throw from Westminster. It's maybe more plush, it's more comfortable than.
I'm sure it's very nice.
Offices, yeah, it's a delightful property, no doubt about it. But what Pat McFadden is saying, and they've come up with these proposals. Labour have come up with these proposals to close. I mean, you've got to. It lacks credit. You could be incredulous looking at it, Mike, because they're saying they're closing a Tory loophole.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're not going to stop the donate. They're not going to stop the ministers or MPs being able to claim freebies. Sometimes whether it's tickets
or shadow ministers.
What they're doing is they're tweaking the rules so that, of course, ministers claim on a different spreadsheet, which of course is part of the.
But of course, the problem for him there as well is that Penny Mordaunt, as I watched her on Laura Kunsberg, said he's actually lying. He got it wrong. He either got it wrong deliberately or he got it wrong because he doesn't know. But she said she was reporting all of the things that happened to her and all the things that she was given every single month.
Yes,
by the month.
And if you look at the ministerial code, you know, and we went through it with Boris Johnson at various points, and other senior ministers, actually the detail is in there. Labour seem to have claiming that actually you don't have to claim the value of gifts given to ministers, but actually...
But this is what they're also being accused of getting wrong, because they're putting values on these things which are way below what the actual true value would be. But let's have another look at Pat McFadden, because he wasn't always quite so forgiving.
What it all adds up to, quite clearly, isn't just one instance at the end of one working day. It adds up to this notion that there is one rule for the country as a whole and another one for the people at the top of government. And that goes back to the Prime Minister himself. He's made a lifetime out of thinking rules don't apply to him.
Now, unless you're confused, you would possibly think that he was talking about his own Prime Minister, but he's not. He's talking about Boris Johnson. That clip was from 2021, when he was having a go at the Conservatives for what he regarded as breaches of the rules. But he doesn't seem to care about the breach of the rules here. He seems to think there aren't any.
Yes, and if you look actually into the finer detail, particularly around, let's say, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah. I see she got a car, by the way, at some point. There's now a listing for some kind of free car that she got.
And she had to claim for the fact that Sam Tarry, her friend, joined her in Lord Alli's Manhattan apartment during a holiday in New York City. That wasn't declared. And of course, Keir Starmer was late with those declarations. He didn't follow the rules with those declarations in terms of claiming them on time when it came to donations for his
and let's
wife.
not forget the second lot of clothing which he admitted to this weekend, right?
Yes.
Turns out there was the one lot of £16,000 worth of clothing. There now was another second lot of £16,000, making £32,000 in total, which he put down as office expenses.
Yes.
So he actually deliberately was misleading there, wasn't he?
They're not office expenses if it's a donation for clothes. That's not you could maybe kind of, I mean, it's a stretch, isn't it?
It is.
It's not
an office expense.
Stretch.
I mean, eventually they put it down as work clothing. I mean, it's not like he's wearing a boiler suit. It's not like he has to put, paint stripping clothes on because he's a paint stripper, or he has to wear, mining gear or buy a miner's helmet because he's going mining. He works in a white-collar job. He wears a suit and a tie and a shirt. He doesn't need to have that provided for him. It's not work clothes, it's just clothes. And
the sentiment of what Pat McFadden is saying there back in 2021 is that you have senior ministers, and of course he's laying the charge at the door of Boris Johnson and his government, who think that they're above it, that the rules don't apply to them.
Yeah.
Well,
that's how it looks, frankly.
And if you think about what we were discussing last week when it came to, the fact that Keir Starmer insisted that he needed this flat during the election so his son could study his GCSEs, 16-year-old son could study his GCSEs.
Even though he kept the flat a month after GCSEs was over.
That isn't something that is afforded to the rest of the population if their family is being disturbed. They don't have the ability to just turn to their multi-millionaire mate and suddenly find a flat that they can borrow, which would otherwise be way out of their means and be able to.
And meanwhile, we still don't really know the truth of what's going on behind the scenes in Downing Street. Sue Gray supposedly still very much sort of hanging on by a thread, if you like. Lots of stories suggesting over the weekend that she might be gone very much sooner rather than later. Nobody can confirm that. But, I mean, I think Keir Starmer's off to Brussels this week, isn't he, to talk to Ursula von der Leyen. And, I mean, nobody really knows for sure what the tensions are, but there are clearly tensions.
The tensions of this, there's a group which is the pinnacle of it, I guess, is a guy called Morgan McSweeney. And he's the director of political strategy and basically was responsible for giving Keir Starmer...
banging heads with Sue Gray,
and he's banging heads with Sue Gray, and Sue Gray doesn't like him because she wants to control all of the information that goes into Keir Starmer. So he's had his desk moved twice further away from the Prime Minister's office. And then Morgan McSweeney has his own team of advisors who work with him, and he doesn't like that and wants to have the access and have the relevant access that he thinks he needs to the Prime Minister. Sue Gray, has been accused by many others, of course, of just basically holding the information. There's bottlenecks of information. Decisions aren't being made. Government isn't working properly because everything stops with Sue Gray, and only when Sue Gray says so, and by the way, she's on £3,000 more than the Prime Minister himself in terms of pay.
And her son is now an MP who was also given £10,000 by Lord Alli, which apparently was what gave her the right to give him a pass for Downing Street. So it's all very tidy, isn't it?
All access pass, and we still don't know any, the exact meetings, the exact control that Lord Alli had when he was attending those meetings.
McFadden and his fellows is attempting to say, I think he said this to Laura Kunsberg, there is no give us X and we'll give you Y. He said there is no Y. They're trying to sell this idea that because he's already in the House of Lords, we're not dangling a peerage over him. Well, that may well be. But it then turns out over the weekend that during the period of time when Tony Blair was still in power and Gordon Brown was still in power, and shortly thereafter, he was going to visit Assad in Syria, as some kind of, off-the-record envoy. Now, there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye, as far as I can see.
Yes, you're absolutely, you're right that there is, and even if there isn't, we still don't know. And donors don't give to political parties. I've never known out of the goodness of their heart. So
he's not after a peerage, but he's after something.
He's got something. And the point is this, Mike. We live in a democracy, and we have the chance to elect politicians, but we also know who we elect, and we know who supports them. So if you're an advisor, there is a register of advisors. We can see who all of the advisors are and how much they are paid. If you're a front bencher in government, and you are given the chance to, whether you're the chief whip or you have a job that as an envoy to a parliamentary secretary, private parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, then we know who you are. You are accountable. And the same goes for senior civil servants as well. If you're senior enough that you can be in the room and you can affect decisions, we know who you are as the public, as the voting public, because we live we don't live in North Korea, we live in Britain, and we have that democracy. And the problem with Lord Alli was that we only knew when those journalists at the Sunday Times went and exposed what had been happening. There was no declaration. They didn't suddenly come forward and say, oh, by the way, Lord Alli's got a AAA all-access pass to Downing Street, which affords him the right to go into political meetings. They didn't offer that information up to you here on Talk or anywhere else.
So the story has still got a long way to go. Rosie Duffield, who we haven't even mentioned yet, she resigned in a very, very big way on Saturday night, saying that she had, in all good conscience, she could not remain basically working with the Labour Party, so she's resigned the whip. And they immediately started throwing her under the bus. They immediately started briefing that, Rosie Duffield's basically, not right in the head. She's already been, very critical of Labour in various different ways. She's one of those terrible women who thinks a woman can't have a penis, But she also says today, and she said it, I think, yesterday, she thinks that Keir Starmer's got a problem with women.
Yes.
Which is a very damaging thing to say.
And she makes the point that we were just discussing just now, that split within Downing Street. And, OK, there's Sue Gray, who's been subject to a number of negative briefings, but when you go away from Sue Gray and you look at the other advisors, they're these young men who've suddenly got all the power, they've got all the trappings of power, they're in Downing Street advising Keir Starmer, and he doesn't have enough voices or a variation of voices, namely women, advising him. There's only Sue Gray, and it looks like Sue Gray's going to get the push.
Maybe she's the one that's got a problem with women. You know how some women who work in politics and who work in other areas don't want any other women around. Maybe she's one of them. I don't know. Anyway, Theo Usherwood's here. We've got loads more to do. Boris is all over the front pages, of course, as well. His new book, which is being titled by the Daily Mail, Political Memoir of the Century. We'll get into that. Also, a couple of other stories going on as well. A drug dealer who went on the run, basically, escaped from prison, lived a completely normal life, paid taxes, was registered, paid council tax, everybody knew where he was. He stayed out for 9 years. It took them to track him down, even though he was hiding, as it were, in plain sight. This is Talk, this is Morning Glory. Send us a voice note, 0344 499 1000. Let's get it on.